And Mr. Chairman, we're live streaming and I think everyone is on.
All right, thank you. Let's start the meeting with a moment of silence, please. Thank you.
Amen.
Yeah. Can we entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes?
Mr. Chairman,
Don't have anything. Yeah.
we need to make just a small typographical change on page 7. On the very top of paragraph that Councilmember Shade said these projects like the Port Royal in West County, actually Fort Royal in West Pawnee.
Okay.
We're not in Beaufort County. So small picky thing, but I thought we'd just make sure our records are clear. So move for approval with that simple amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tom. I also have 2 slight changes, revisions on page 1 under E, where it says, Mr. O'Brien said it should say 76 lot subdivision. It should read instead. And
So
on page 4 under G1, instead of Mr. Fountain, it should say Mr. Alltop.
why don't we do this? If y'all are so minded, maybe to defer them and I can get staff to correct that and send those back to the committee at the next meeting.
Can we have a motion for deferral?
So move.
Second.
Properly moved and second. All in favor of deferral, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Cook. Let's get down to temporary encroachments. Mr. O'Brien, anything unusual that we
No,
need?
sir, nothing at all. We have some irrigation, a couple fences, and that was it for this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Stormwater management update. Low battery phase 3, Mr. Fountain. You're up.
Mr. Chairman, I think we had one other item
We did?
G.
G1, Mr. Chairman.
We've got G, Mr. Chairman, 5.5
Oh, yeah,
Alexander
I'm
Street.
sorry. G1, discussion on encroachment request for 5.5 Alexander Street. Who's gonna take that on? You, Mr. O'Brien?
I'll start off, and then Julia's got a little bit of information to share with the committee, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great.
This is 5.5 Alexander Street, and what this is the applicant has created a curb cut in the city parking lot off of George Street across from the Gilliard Center. And in that, there was an application originally applied for last year, and the application originally was turned down. And then we had a change of employee downstairs, and a new employee by mistake actually issued a permit. Then they also had applied for an encroachment agreement, and as we've done a little research into it, there are a couple of issues which have a little bit of concern for staff. And Julie, you want to share the picture we have down there that everybody can kind of see? The green area that you can see on the page there, that is the curb cut off of the lot on the south side of George Street, across from the Gilliard Center. And the last thing is actually a picture which we took today, if Julia wants to scroll up so everyone can see that. And that unfortunately is not turned the right way, but if you can imagine that fence, and you can see the curb cut right there. A couple of concerns we have from staff are, number one, that the actual curb cut should be, if allowed, should be a concrete apron in the right of way. Right now it's stone, which causes a potentially dangerous situation to pedestrians and other people because it leaks into the right of way. Other concerns we have are that this lot has, and Robbie Somerville was going to check, and I have not heard back from Robbie. I just texted him right before the meeting. This lot is sometimes, and Peter may want to talk about this from a standpoint of the Gilliard, but this lot is sometimes used for VIP parking, and therefore is closed off to the public. So therefore, the ingress egress to allow access to the parking space could possibly not always be available. So those are some of the concerns we had. And I think in speaking to legal, speaking to Julia, that if allowed, that the one thing we would require is a hold harmless agreement for any potential injuries or damages caused by the use of that space. And Julia, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, Tom, I think you covered it.
we could come to some kind of agreement with the homeowner, like Tom said, just alleviating any risk liability to the city by allowing them to use this. I think that's really all I have to add here for this one.
Okay, Councilmember Seekings, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know a little bit about this just because the property owners come to me with some just some comments and some questions. So I think Tom framed it all very well, as did Julia. But a couple of things. One is that the homeowners are actually listening. They obviously can't participate. So just so you know, they did make that application. They did follow the permit. They are willing, ready, and able to comply with any conditions that are put on by this committee and city council, including redoing that curb cut. In terms of accessibility and ingress and egress during times when the Gilliard has private events and VIP parking, as you know, what they put up there is sawhorses, and they always have an attendant there. So the lot is accessible at all times, and where this curb cut is not anywhere near where the actual designated parking spaces are. So, you know, it seems to me that there is a resolution available out there. It's not like these homeowners went and did something that we didn't tell them they could do. They did it, and then there were some sort of questions out there. But, you know, what I would suggest is, much like we do through this committee with temporary encroachments, allow a temporary encroachment that's reviewable with some conditions on it, that they do the hold harmless and waiver of liability, as Mr. O'Brien suggested, and conform that curb cut to the concrete pour, as opposed to what they've got out there now, to the specification that Mr. O'Brien does. That with that, I'm prepared to support this, and I think we should support this. I think there's some other issues out there that we probably don't need to go into, but this one, I think, with those conditions, would be an appropriate way for us to proceed.
Thank you, Council Member. Any other discussion on behalf of the committee?
Yeah, Councilmember.
Do we need a second on it, Mr. Chairman?
Have we had a motion yet?
Have we had a motion on it yet?
This is listed as discussion. I think right now this project is currently under a stop work order since they began the work on the permit that was issued. So I think the discussion among staff was we needed some general direction from committee or council as to how we should proceed next. And I think Urasco was raising his hand as well.
Yes. Thank you, council members. You know, the position of the real estate, from a real estate management standpoint, we just like to say that it will create a precedent. That's the problem we have with it. And ironically, by improving the apron, we feel like it makes it more permanent. So I mean, I know that's an ironic position as far as paving the apron, but it still creates a precedent for anybody else who might come along wanting to access through one of the city's lots.
Councilman Seekings?
Just sort of in quick response, what I would move or ask this committee to do is direct staff, sort of based on the comments that have been made, to come up with the conditions out there. With all due respect to Mr. Rasco, I don't think there are that many properties out there in this type of configuration where this precedent will be something that will be a opening the sort of floodgates of applications. This is kind of a unique configuration out there. And again, that lot, there's a lot of things that happen over the top of that lot, including but not limited to access to dumpsters for hotels and all those kind of other things that I don't believe we have agreements out there on any of that. I think in this one, we'll have an agreement. We'll have an encroachment agreement with the property owner. And I think I definitely think it's the right thing for the city to do.
Mr. Mayor.
So what's being proposed here, did I hear right? This would be a temporary encroachment, which would mean that if in the event the arrangement became problematic, that the city could remove the encroachment?
That would be the recommendation that I would have, Mr. Mayor. I would call it I would phrase it a renewable temporary encroachment for a term. And then, you know, we always have the ability to go back and see how it's all working.
Right. So if I may share, I don't think the owners would mind. It was totally accidental, coincidental. I was parked there. I was going to my car and I saw them painting the fence, and they're making it look very nice. They're painting the fence. And so they invited me in the yard, And what they've done, basically, they've transformed their side yard, which faces Alexander Street, and I'm sure used to have a permanent driveway and a parking space, into a lovely garden and a landscaped space. I mean, it really is lovely. So they've been very creative as to trying to put back a parking space that, in this unique situation, only could get back out to the public right away by way of our parking lot. You know, they were being very thoughtful and creative in that sense. And that part of the lot is at the driveway and not at a parking space. So it doesn't like take up any parking spaces. So I do think it's reasonable to give them a temporary encroachment and try it out. Hopefully it won't cause any problems for anybody, but they've got a beautiful yard, I'll say that.
Councilman Shea.
Ms. Copeland, I need to revert to my first year of law school in discussion about easements of necessity. They're going to be entitled to this anyhow, wouldn't they? So they can have access to what the mayor just described.
I think they already have access from Alexander Street to this property. This is just a secondary.
Okay.
They've got access, but basically they're choosing not to use it as such. They've converted it more to a garden than a driveway.
They want a nice side yard and not to mess it up with cars going back and forth on it. I don't blame them. I mean, this is no harm to the city. I would hope I give staff enough direction. I think we all want to work this out to their benefit and help them out a little bit.
Well, let me ask a couple of questions. Well, Mr. Mayor, you had your hand.
I was just going to add that little section of Alexander Street is a dead end, and they have on-street parking there that's normally available because hardly anybody even knows that side of Alexander Street even exists anymore. It got cut off from the other side by our parking lot decades ago. Anyway.
I had a couple of questions for Ms. Copeland. If hypothetically we got a really popular event at the Gill Yard and one of the donors, grateful donors, parks in front of this gate, you know, runs in, can they be towed away?
I wouldn't think so.
I mean, if the homeowner calls, I mean, do they have the right to tow these people away?
I mean, if the homeowner called the police and said there's a car blocking their driveway and had a copy of the agreement, that's a possibility, but we might have to address that in the agreement itself.
I think it'd be good to do that. And then hypothetically, if the property's sold, I don't know, 15 years from now, you know, a new person's coming and thinking, hey, we got a parking lot there. I mean, we got a parking space there. Does this temporary encroachment transfer to a new owner?
That's something we would have to address for sure. Not the way Councilman Seekings has raised it. But yeah, I mean, that is certainly something that we would need to cover in this agreement for sure.
Okay. She answered your concern, Councilman Seekings. I saw your hand fly.
I just want to sort of add on that, remembering that when there are events at the Gill Yard and that space is blocked off for VIPs, not only do they put up barricades, there is an attendant there. So the attendant, and I've seen it because I've been to events.
I have too, yeah.
Makes you park in parking spaces and not along that curb line anyway. So in the unlikely event that it happened, I think the homeowner now on notice that it's possible it could happen, and we're not going to get in the game of tow this, tow that. We'll put that in the agreement.
Yeah, I hope not. Thank you.
No, I don't think, and I think again, I think they're ready, willing, and able to work with the city to make sure this works for everybody.
All right, great. Any more input by committee members? But I guess staff's got a little bit more information, and this will be coming back at another date.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Copeland. Now we can go to H1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, no problem at all. Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So H1 is the low battery phase 3. This is asking the committee to recommend approval of change order number 1 with Gulfstream Construction. It's a $221,680 change order. This is to increase the number of units of basically polyurethane injection grout that we use to fill voids. We estimate how much of that material we need based on the previous phases that were constructed. In this situation, we're having more voids that we need to backfill with that grouting method than we had in the previous two phases. So this increases how much the contractor is allowed to use. They're only paid based on how much we actually do measure them using. And we expect this to get us through this phase comfortably.
Okay, isn't this phase a good bit longer than the previous phase?
It is, Mr. Chairman. We do account for that when we come up with our calculations for void space. We just have additional voids as we've been going back and repairing the foundation. And that's just something we have to account for. It's always a little bit of a challenge on a historic site that you can't kind of rip open and investigate prior to starting work. It's kind of like when you take the wallboard off of a property you're retrofitting, you find out what exactly is behind those walls.
Okay, great. Any input from committee members? What's the pleasure of the committee?
So moved.
Properly moved in.
Second.
Second it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? H2, Mr. Fountain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is low battery. This is the phase 4, the yet to be constructed section. This is basically asking JMT in the form of a fee amendment to come in and do some conceptual design options for how that corridor will look in front of White Point Gardens to make sure that we have early buy-in on the basically the format of the road and wall corridor in the area. It's not looking at changing the design of the wall per se, just the way that the street, parking, and wall all interact with the park frontage.
Okay.
That's $48,718.
All right. What's the pleasure of the committee?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moving second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I
sir.
think this is important and money well spent. As you might recall, in the early days of the project design, there was a lot of question about how we would get through that one area in front of White Point Garden. And it never did get resolved. So it would be nice to have this resolved before we put phase 4 out to bid and everyone's on the same page in the community and at council. And I think this would be really money well spent.
All right. Thank you, Mr. It's good to know your district, right, Councilman Seeger?
That's correct. And this one, there's a lot of eyes on this district.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor.
Did you say phase 4? Is that the final phase of this?
That is the final phase.
We're getting there though, man. I'm telling you. Listen, I take a point of privilege. About a month ago, Don and I were down at the battery, the improved low battery. And I was looking back, Mr. Mayor, at West Ashley. And I'm not a photographer, believe me. And took a picture happened to be looking back at the sun setting West Ashley. Caught the orange ball tipping the Ashley River bridges and happened to snap it at the right time. I'm gonna push that out to y'all, man. It is really a beautiful shot.
Yes, sir.
It was a lucky grab on my part.
Councilmember Waring,
Yes, sir.
I hope there's no PDA going on over there.
Yeah.
Public display of affection.
Listen, man, public display. I have all of y'all know. I proposed to my wife at that bandstand at White Point Gardens. So
Wow.
that's right.
Is she still wondering why she did that, isn't she?
That's right. Me too. No,
By the way, Mr. Chairman, on phase 3, they're in the process right now of pouring concrete. And Matt, you can tell me I'm right or wrong about this, but they're going at a very good rate, even notwithstanding the fact we've had some weather challenges and like. If you go down there, it's formed up and the concrete pour is going really well. So we're fingers crossed still going along. How many feet are they doing a week right now, Matt? They're doing a good number.
They work 100 feet of wall at a time, but you're right that what they basically started doing, and it's one of the advantages of having the same construction crew from each phase of the project, that they actually, one crew is cutting wall out, the next crew is forming the rebar forms basically while they're removing the wall. They pick up the forms and place them in as soon as the wall is removed, and then they start their pour. So there's almost no cessation of activity while they're waiting for other crews to work. And it is an amazing rate they've hit on this phase so far. They're doing really well.
And if you haven't done it, go down there and watch this process, because it's very interesting and very cool, for lack of a better word, to see the remnants of the old wall as they pull it out. They cut it and then they lift it basically, and you can see the wall in its form as it was built. And 1912 or whatever year that segment was built, and how well preserved some of it is and how decayed a good bit of it is too. It's fascinating.
Mhm.
Anybody filming this or taking time photos?
There's a camera on it 24/7.
Good deal. All right.
We do have the camera, and it is set up for time-lapse photos at the end. So we'll basically build a project construction montage out of the project.
So this is something one day will be on Discovery Channel. Right?
Yep.
It might be.
I hope so. All right. Did we carry that motion? I forgot. Did we carry that?
No, Sarah, they're still.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Number 3, H3, Wapu Creek Place Drainage Improvement.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is recommend approval of a construction contract with First Construction Management. This is one of our small projects, $43,890 for basically local drainage improvements at the intersection of Wapu Creek Drive and Wapu Creek Place. We've got funds available in the FY22 small project allocation.
Move for approval.
Second.
Second, Councilman Ross Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to briefly comment on this. This is the Wapu Place development is right there on Maybank over on James Island along the Wapu cut over there. This is in my district. They have a very, very engaged homeowners association over there. We've been working together for years now on trying to address some stormwater issues over there. It's been a long time coming, but Matt and his team have done a tremendous job of looking into a very smart and efficient solution to a lot of their problems that is actually within the city of Charleston's purview to help with. There's going to be a big bang for the buck here. There's a lot of properties, not just that development, that are going to see the benefit of this. And this is a really good, efficient use of funds here. And it's a perfect example of how small projects can make a big difference. TM, let's trademark that. Small projects, big difference. But it's really important and it's really good. And this is a project we're doing on James Island. So it's always nice to highlight that when we're making things happen over on James Island. So just very thankful that we're this far, and I would encourage all my colleagues to support this request. Thank you.
Good deal. All in favor of the motion before us, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
I'm sorry, who was the motion in the second on that?
Oh, Councilman Shiade.
Okay,
Was it?
And I
No,
think I
I
seconded.
think it was Councilman. Did you read the motion, Councilman Appel?
Either he
I
raised it
think-
and I second it, or vice
Okay.
versa, either way.
all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Right. Okay.
Give him the
Thank y'all.
credit for raising the motion. I'll
Yeah,
put
it was
second.
his district.
It's
right?
his district.
Thank you. Well, for now, at least. Thank you.
For now, at least, yes.
Thank you.
H4, Barberry Woods Drainage Improvement.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're going to make a slight modification of this. This is one of these kind of relatively quick moving grant opportunities. We did have a discussion with the executive director of the South Carolina Conservation Bank, and he said they have an exceptionally competitive round this year they're expecting. So he recommended a smaller ask. So we're going to modify this to recommend approval to apply to the South Carolina Conservation Bank for the amount of $100,000 in grant funding within a city match of the remainder, which would be $275,240 roughly. I'm off by $960 there to acquire property for the Barberry Woods Drainage Improvement Project. So this is basically looking for some other grant opportunities towards this project that the council's previously approved from Drainage Fund funding. So of course we have those funds available within the current allocation. This is the portion of the project that went through real estate committee previously, and it's the owner that is working with us for a fee simple acquisition on 3 parcels and a gratis drainage easement dedication on 1 parcel.
Okay. I don't see Councilman Brady on. If he is, hopefully he'll unmute himself. But if not, any additional input from committee members?
Let's get it done.
All right. Have a motion, please.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded by the mayor. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. H5, James Island Creek. Testing the water quality over there.
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the James Island Creek, it's an information only item, but we did want to inform the Public Works Utilities Committee what the James Island Creek TMDL task force has been working on, where basically we have a partnership between the city, the county, and the town of James Island, where we all work together to embrace basically the costs of improving the water quality within James Island Creek, which currently has an Enterococcus Tmdl, which is basically a derivative of fecal coliform that you use to measure in salt water. So obviously that's an impact for recreational uses of the waterway. One of the things we have to do under that TMDL, and that we choose to do more than the absolute minimum for, so that we can try to accelerate the speed at which we're improving water quality in the area, is this water quality analysis during rain events and during dry periods at different locations through the creek to identify where likely contamination is coming from and what sources that contamination is coming from, which we do with basically some DNA tracking. The city's contribution to next year's contract will be $39,382. That's just over half. And the amount is based on a previous MOU that we have with the other two entities, based on relative percentage area within each jurisdiction within that watershed. I'm happy to talk about it in more detail if anyone has any more specific questions.
One thing I'd like to say, though, is the coordination that's taking place between the city, the town of James Island, the PSD, and CWS on this one. Everybody's on the same page trying to push forward on this. So I do believe a meaningful solution is going to come out of something that's really, I think a lot of it's coming from septic runoff, but that's my layperson opinion. Any input from committee members? Thank you, Mr. Fountain. We're at the end of the agenda. Oh, Mr. Mayor?
I would just like to add a comment. I'm pleased to serve on the task force along with Councilmember Parker and many others, because as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, there's many partners in this task force, but our efforts to date have really yielded some great results, because this testing has been going on, and it's led us to proposals to try to address some problems, which the biggest one we've identified is to try to connect the remaining septic tank users in the basin, so to speak, of James Island Creek to sewer systems. And as a result, Representative Spencer Wetmore was able to obtain $1 million out of the state budget to get a leg up on getting that done. And so the testing and the efforts already has led to some other grant funding, and there's another grant application underway to another state agency. So some real progress is being made. I know we were somewhat required by DHEC to do all of this, admittedly, but I just want to report that and Councilmember Appel, by the way, also serves on the task force as well. But some good progress is being made.
Agree. Yeah, but I tell you what, it's a good feeling to either sit around and hear and talk solutions, and it's not that tug of war of, us against them, and that's behind us now. So I'm sure Ms. Parker, I don't know, Ms. Parker, I saw you here. Do you have any input on this one? Ms. Parker, you muted.
I'm here, no input, just a viewer.
Okay, good. Just in case.
Thank you.
We're down at the end of the meeting. I do want to bring something up that we touched on pretty good at the end of the real estate meeting, committee members. It was about what I think is a 4-star hotel that's being proposed, West Ashley. One thing I neglected to mention at the real estate meeting is that this hotel will sit in the Doo-Wop drainage district. And there's a huge drainage problem over there, because the county and the city is working on that Doo-Wop issue. So I think that may, Mr. Fountain, need to, this is going to happen, maybe speed up a little bit, because it sits in one of the low spots, let's put it like that. Okay. I'm sure there'll be more to come on that. Councilman Shahid.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think what you're alluding to as well is that once we do the work over in that DuPont Walpole area, they go get the benefit of that.
They're gonna get the benefit of it, right?
And that's a cooperative effort by a lot of different agencies involved in there, but they're not in the city, and they're going to get the benefit of that huge drainage flooding and improvement as well, which we're glad to do because it benefits everybody. But just another reason why we need to get these properties into the city.
You know, I spoke to the owner after that meeting, Councilman, and they have a time frame of trying to get to going vertical in 2025, which sounds like a lot of time, but it's not. But anyway, not on something that big. Any last input?
Moving adjourned.
By acclamation, we stand adjourned. See you, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow.